Hello and welcome to Agile TD Mondays. Today with a talk about how to get the most of your debriefs. But first of all, let me thank you first for all your submissions. We received over 430 papers and we're literally overwhelmed. So we will announce the chosen speakers together with a program at the beginning of May, so stay tuned. And now to Tony and Sharath. They are two of our tutorial speakers and they will give a top-notch tutorial at the upcoming Agile Testing Days. So to you guys.
Hi, hope everyone's well. So thanks to me. My name's Tony Bruce. I live near London and I work in and out of London. I'm a test consultant and I've worked across the various industries. And Sharath and I have got together to work on some different things. And over to you, Sharath.
Hello everybody, my name is Sharath Byregowda. I also live in London, but from Bangalore, India. I work across different roles, like Agile Test Coach to Tester, based on what my what the contract is. And I'm very passionate about exploratory testing and Agile in principle. So that's me in brief.
Okay, so what we're basically going to do is have a discussion. I will be the inquirer and Sharath will be the answerer, rather. So let's begin. So Sharath, I understand you've been looking in and at around debriefs. So I mean, just briefly, what is a debrief?
Well, with exploratory testing, we know that it has 4 key elements: learning, test execution, test design, and analysis of what we have just tested. And in most places, what I've seen is we do a good job at learning test design and test execution. But when it comes to analyzing our test sessions or learning from what we just completed in our last session, we either do it very minimally or we ignore it completely. So that is the key element. That is one of the very key elements to exploratory testing, is what I believe in. And that is where debrief comes in.
Okay, so what are the reasons that you think that some debriefs are missed, or debriefs are missed in general?
Well, it could be a lot of reasons. One very common thing could be we do not have time to do debrief, or people, we could also say, okay, let's do a 15-minute slot in a day for a debrief, but the team has about 4 testers and we have about 12 sessions to cover in a debrief, so that might not start working. Or we might just completely ignore it. Like in my last place, we had very good metrics. Well, we had a framework that could give us some numbers. So testers would exploratory test, put the session sheets into individual folders, and the script would run, bring out the report required for session-based testing. But we did not do any debriefs, and it only after about 3 months we realized, okay, we were at X, but have we moved from X to the next level? We don't know. We did not know the answer for it. So also it could be metrics, which could be misleading, that we get locked in and we completely miss debriefs. So it could be any of them.
Okay, so while you were getting numbers from exploratory sessions, testing sessions, you weren't, or you didn't feel that you were actually learning anything from them?
We were kind of, we think we were learning the product quite well with each exploratory test session. But when it came to reviewing one another testing session, we did not do that at all. And even after 3-4 months, we had this gap of, okay, who's testing what? Okay, if I started off at a specific level, have I improved as a tester in 4 months' time doing the same thing? We did not know. And because we were not debriefing did not help us at all in understanding how a specific tester would approach a problem.
Okay. So then you were getting some things, but maybe not as much as you could if you had debriefs.
That is correct.
I'll
just throw in the analogy of a pull request. So with GitHub, if a development team is using GitHub as the code repo, a developer raises a pull request, and he could tag the team, he could tag some developers on it, and the developers would review it, or the team would review the pull request, and another developer, if they have review comments, they would make the review comments for the pull request, or if it goes through all the review, then they would merge the pull request. That is exactly the principle with debrief. I finished a quick test session. Can I just call upon a fellow tester or a developer in my team, run through my test session, and if they are happy, I can move on to the next session, or if we can think together, any other ideas, we will use it.
Okay, and is there any difference in the work environment, whether or not a debrief would help? So, for example, a lot of people work in kind of a agile environment or a Scrum band. Does that make a difference to the debrief?
I personally do not think so, because in an agile environment, we could be working off stories, and my test session could be at the back of a story. And at the end of my session is when I ping a fellow tester or a developer to pair up with me. It could be the same at a waterfall. In a waterfall environment, tester could be testing some set of requirements. So they finish their exploratory testing session. They can ping a fellow tester or a developer to go through the findings that they have found in debrief.
Okay, and do you think there would be any instances where debriefs would not be beneficial?
Very good question. Maybe if I have worked with a tester for a long time, or I know the team very well, that I individually know every tester and understand their pattern to testing, then maybe we can avoid debriefs. But even then, I would ask myself, would I learn a bit more if I do debrief there? Or also, if a team is pairing up, so if a couple of them pair up for every test session, maybe debrief might not be required. But again, if a couple of them do a test session together, and if there is a third member reviewing that very quickly, would it harm, or would it give more test ideas, or would it just help go through the test session? I do not know, but maybe these are the reasons where debrief might not be as beneficial as in other cases.
So I guess I can see that, but you also mentioned doing a debrief with a developer, so you would miss out information with other people in your team, right, if you weren't doing debriefs?
That's correct. That's very much right, yeah.
Okay.
Some other things that I can see clearly where debrief helps is it's rapid feedback. It's really quick feedback to my test session, and we also learn from one another. So it's not the reviewer learning from the tester who just completed a session, but it's also the tester who completed the session learning from the questions by the reviewer. It can also be used as like coaching and mentoring. So if you have a new tester joining into the team, then you can use these debrief sessions to mentor and coach them. So there's a lot more benefits to debrief in those aspects.
Okay, and we've kind of touched on it briefly already, but can anybody do debriefs?
The answer is yes, but from my experience, I think it would be useful if someone is a bit senior, just to start it rolling, and then it soon can, and any member in the team can do it. The only few pointers would be this session is a more of a constructive session and not as a session where you assess somebody's work. That should not be the objective of it. The objective of debrief is to understand how a tester went about achieving his objective for the session, and at the back of it, what were the risks, what were the questions, the bugs, and how can we think of some more ideas that the tester couldn't think of during the session. That should be the objective rather than trying to make him feel a bit more defensive experience. That would kill the debriefs.
Okay, so it's not, generally speaking, a way to assess a tester, but it's more so that everyone can learn from the sessions that are being taken.
Exactly, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so and how long roughly do you think a debrief would take?
In our team, it's about 3 minutes, about 2 to 3 minutes, because I've been working with this team for about 8 months now, and that is all we spend in debrief. But when we started off, I would say we used to spend about 4 to 5 minutes.
Okay, so roughly then you've been working with this team for 8 months. So how do you actually do a debrief in your team currently?
It's the way we do it is I finish a test session, or my colleague finishes a test session. He would ping me, ask me to come join him to do a debrief. That's when I just go sit next to him, ask him questions such as, what was your charter like? What is the story about? How did you go about testing this? What kind of test data did you use? Did you have to create some test data, or did it exist? Do we have to store it somewhere so we can use it in the next session? And basically that is just walking through the test session and together trying to understand the risk, well, not just the risk, how we went about testing that session. What I have also found this helps us, like I cannot test all the stories in my team, and it gets shared between the testers. But by doing this debrief, we are also up to date on all stories, because from the debrief we also learn what the other story was and all the technical details in it. So it's much more better than just someone else sharing that information, because here you are actually going through the test sessions, so you get to learn a bit more about the functionality that you have not tested. Okay,
so just in a couple of minutes, you've kind of covered what it took to prepare for this testing, as well as the technical aspects of this.
Yeah.
So it's a good, again, as we've mentioned, it's a good learning way, or good learning method. Okay, so could you consider a debrief a kind of a stand-up for testers?
I do not think so, because usually in a stand-up for an agile team, we go about what we worked on yesterday, what we are going to work on today, and if there are any blockers and impediments. But in debrief, we go a bit more detailed, wherein we, okay, this is my test log, this is how I went about testing it, this was my charter, this is what we found at the back of this test session. So I think it's a bit more open-ended than just giving an update as in a stand-up.
Okay, so that, I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. But if you are new to actually holding a debrief, are there, can you suggest anything to help people get started?
Yes, we have come up with, based on our debriefing, we have put together some of the heuristics that I'll quickly share here, which could help.
Thing is in the heuristics.
Yeah, so this is it clear? The cell here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can see, these are some of the heuristics that we have put together that can help with debriefs if you are starting new, or even if you are an experienced exploratory tester and you are used to debriefing. It's pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, briefly tell me the story of what you're testing. What does your charter look like? Some people call it objective, some people call it mission. That's perfectly okay. What type of test types were you focused on? Was it just functional, API? What were the different test areas? Maybe it's the context that we work in, but we keep a close eye on the test data. So there's quite a few questions that we ask about the test data. We also try to capture the timing that we spent on testing, setup, bugs, or anything else that we have noted down during debrief. And then we ask pretty straightforward questions like, did you make note of any observations, any questions, any risk that you could think of, or did anything limit your testing, or was a kind of a blocker when you wanted to finish it? Two things I would like to touch upon here is Brainstorm for more ideas. Here the analogy is more like you going into a gym. Say you are doing a bench press in the gym. You have about 25 plates on both sides, and you are struggling to complete the last set. That's when you really need to push yourself. And that's so if you are working with a partner that can give you support at that moment. That's exactly what this is about. So at the end of the session, we think, okay, can we time box about like 2 minutes and see if we can think of any other possible way to break the system or achieve the charter. So that's what we do there when I say brainstorm for more ideas there. And summary. What has helped us a lot is after debrief, summarize it, because there's so much information that we go through in our test sessions that summarizing that and putting that in a format that's useful for you to quickly scan through really helps. So if I'm visiting the same story after about 3 months, the summary helps us to understand, okay, this is the story, this is what the story was about. This was our test log. These were the endpoints that that we had, and this was our kind of test data. So it just helps us summarize. So yeah. So this is our list of heuristics for debrief.
Okay, and the summary that you mentioned, that seems like it could be something that's shared with, say, the developers when you want to talk over an issue, or maybe programmers or whoever. Is that something you currently do?
Yes, we'll do that. So what we do is we summarize in the debrief, and this summary goes in as a comment in the Jira for the specific story that we are working on. And we tag our business or the product owner on it. And when the product owner or the business is available, either we pair up with them, talk them, walk them through the summary of all the testing that's gone in for this specific story so they can accept it. Or sometimes, well, most of the times the PS and product owner, they would look at the summary themselves, and if they are convinced they had enough clarity there, they would accept the story.
Okay, cool. So you talked about Jira, but are there different ways of capturing this information? And then after you've captured it, what can you do with it?
Very good question. Again, so what we did come up with, well, it's not just capturing the summary. What we built was a framework. So this framework about DEFT, we call it, which is Debrief Exploratory Testing, is about capturing all the information that we find in a testing session, and then turn it into a bit of a meaningful way to present it. So that's what we are using DEFT for, and I will introduce it to you in a couple of minutes.
Okay, and so DEFT, is that something that's fully fledged, or is it something you're working on? Is it?
It is a work in progress. As you can see up here, the README tag. It is a work in progress, so it's a very initial version of it. I have not even put it on Git yet. There are quite a few limitations. but it's the message that we wanted to pass on rather than the framework itself. So a couple of touch points that I want to walk through why we wanted DEFT were.
Okay, so DEFT is there to help get the idea of the information that you can get out of debriefs, or the learning that you can get out of debriefs. So the framework itself is not so important.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So essentially, as with any other framework, take the bits that you like and drop the rest.
Exactly. And what we struggled with was there was nothing else in the market that would make testers tool independent. What I mean by that is, what if a tester in a team wanted to just use his notebook and pen for his test session, or someone wanted to use Rapid Reporter, and another one wanted to use Jira Capture. So keeping that in mind is when we developed DEFT, which means you can use any of your notes capturing tool, but from a debrief, we will capture this information. And then you don't have to conform to a specific approach, like just SPTM. You can keep it a bit more open-ended. And all the numbers or the information that goes into this framework are already reviewed. Well, it comes at the back of an open discussion between two individuals. So we hope it will be less error-prone, and it makes it more relevant.
Okay, so DEFT?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last point there, easily customizable and to whatever you want to capture and what metrics you want to find out. So I have two versions of it now. One, I'll start with absolutely zero metrics. This is just information captured during debriefs. So all the tester has to fill in, or the tester and the reviewer has to fill in is this table up here. So this is just a date. Okay, when did you do the session? This is auto-generated, which is session ID 2 because the session ID 1 is up there. Who the tester is, so that again is an autofill, nothing. And then what the charter was about, how much time did we spend on it? This is approximately, this is not, okay, did you really spend so much time on? And then again, time spent on setup. Did you find any bugs? Yes, there were, which is the log message was not appropriate, and then an example up there. Did you think of any questions? Yes, which was like how accurate should it exactly say what the error was, or if it just says, well, there was an error, is it good enough? So that I had that question, so I put that there. What test areas was I looking at? It was functional and API, so I entered that. And then how do you feel about the session? Is like, did you think of any risk, blocker, or interruption? So I put like, since we have not implemented errors yet, the decision of how detailed the logs is, we don't know. And finally, how did you feel about the session? I was a bit frustrated during the session because the log messages did not help me, and it took a lot of to and fro to find out what it should be doing. So with just that information filled in, you can generate something like this. So across all the stories, what your charters were, what was your risk, blockers, or interruptions, the bugs, and the questions, all those information captured in one go. And even though
you mentioned this is customizable, right? So
yes.
For example, say if I'm not a very nice person, which I'm not, and I don't really care about testers' feelings, you don't necessarily have to put in the fields.
No,
right?
no, you don't have to. Like, I'll show you another version of it where.
Sorry, continue with what you were showing before we switch.
Okay. So no, you don't have to. You just have to. You can just leave it blank, or you can change it to anything that you want.
Okay.
It's completely customizable, and even though we don't promote metrics or recommend metrics, but some cases it might be useful. So you can put some very quick charts as well from the data we collected, like how many sessions did we execute per day? We did not do any sessions at all. Was it because the testing environment was down or no cards available to test? So those information are also useful at times. And a bit of coverage as to the different test types. Of course, these are all stacked up. It doesn't say which session led to what, but gives you a quick idea of what's the coverage been like in terms of test types to a specific story. So that's one version of it. As I said, it's so easily customizable. This is another version of it where, as Tony, you mentioned, you don't like the word test a feeling, maybe confidence, or if you don't like confidence also, you can remove that.
I do care about my testers. I just don't know if I want to record their feelings in documentation.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Also, in cases like when you do not want to capture information but just numbers, okay, how many bugs did you find? If it was 2, or how many questions? 3. You can still capture the data up here. But if you just want to capture in a debrief to make it really quick, or you want to just attach your test session and you want to record numbers, you can do that as well. And then you can plot different kind of graphs at the back of the data as well. So up there, as you can see.
Okay, so you mentioned the number of questions. What can you learn from listing number of questions?
Well, very quickly, what I can learn is the test. Well, that specific story was not groomed quite well, or we missed story kickoff for that, or it did not have a good 3 amigo session. So we had a lot of questions, and if it is backed by a lot of bugs, like the story up here, it clearly means we are not doing our test amigo sessions quite well. So it could give us those pointers as well.
So just quickly, for those who don't know what an amigo session is, what is 3 amigos?
It's in an agile world where a developer, a tester, and the business come together and discuss what needs to be implemented at the back of a story. And you come up with examples for the acceptance criteria that is required to complete the story. So that's what happens in a test amigo session. So you ask questions and try and understand it much better, the requirements.
Okay, so you're saying essentially that by recording the number of questions that come out from the testing on a story or a feature or whatever it is, that it can give an indication that maybe the requirements and the technical details weren't discussed enough.
It could, but
before
yeah,
testing.
It could, but
or at least there was a lack of something.
Exactly, because okay. As with any metrics, it can be false. It can be a wrong indicator, but it's a heuristic, and it gives a pretty good heuristic that something did not quite work well.
Okay, so and you mentioned this is kind of a work in progress and it's in its infancy, and at the moment I can see that it just lists a sprint. Is it a sprint per sheet at the moment or workbook at the moment?
No, it's a story per sheet. Sorry, a story per tab. And you are right, it is a work in progress, which means I do not have anything like, say for a quarter, we did about 4 sprints, and can I club all of them into like one sheet up here is something that is a work in progress, where I'm trying to link all the epics into to the stories and then capture information such as this. But that's a work in progress. So what I could suggest now is do this at a sprint level, and then can have one tab or one master sheet where we only pull the information that we want to work on. Say, for example, you are only interested in looking at stories tagged to a specific epic, and I want to see just the risks or blockers or interruptions. I'm not worried about the questions or charters, so you can do that.
Okay, and so what else have we covered everything that is in DEFT currently, or is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, we have covered everything. DEFT exists as it stands, but I will soon be putting it on Git and sharing that information out. Okay,
and is this something that you're looking for help with? Are you looking for feedback, or are you going to...
Yes, very much. I'm looking for questions, comments, collaborators who can take this to the next level. Everything, yeah, any possible help is most appreciated.
Okay, and so can you go back to the data for a second?
Data, yes.
Yeah, so is this kind of looks like the kind of thing that you might be able to share with your stakeholders as well, to share an idea of what's going on and maybe even a bit of coverage, all that kind of stuff that they'd be interested in currently doing, or is it something that's still being worked on now?
We are currently doing this one because we do not want any numbers, but we are capturing this information that is currently shared at the back of every sprint. We also use this for retrospectives. If there are a lot of like questions around specific stories or some proper blockers, like you can look it up. Like here, we did not have mock screens which are up to date, so that was discussed. And up here, we did not. It was completely around logging, and because we have not implemented error messages yet, more detailed on logging. So those questions also can go into your retrospectives.
Okay, but you don't necessarily need to put all that information in there, right? Because you have it.
No.
As you mentioned before, you've already got your session notes, so you can just attach your session notes.
Absolutely.
And your numbers that you want to update.
Absolutely, and as we mentioned, like it's completely customizable, so people can make use of it the way they want. The whole concept is it's the idea of having debrief and conversation between human beings that reflect into a report rather than an automation script just sniffing through and looking at the tags and putting that into a report. Okay,
so to recap, we're kind of talking about debriefs being maybe not as important as they should be, or potentially not as important as they should be, and to help bring them forward, you've created a framework that is customizable, gives you back some data, or if you want it, gives you back some metrics.
Yeah. Debrief is very important, but up here, this puts a debrief into work from which you can also use. You can share your testing story. You can share coverage. You can share anything the stakeholder wants. You can put that information out.
Yeah, and you also had a section for time spent on setup, right? So if you spent, I don't know, an hour and a half on setup, maybe that could be something that you could look into to script or automate or whatever the case may be. There might be a way to help run that so it doesn't take so long for similar situations.
Yes, very true, very true.
Okay, I think I'm good. Do you need to add anything else, Sharath?
No, that is all I have around DEFT so far.
Yeah, okay. So just to reiterate, DEFT is a framework that's available. However, that's a lovely screen capture. But it's not the framework that's important. It's just the kind of, I guess, message behind the framework that is.
Absolutely.
But the framework is there if you want it.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
Cool. I think we're done, Sabine. Thank you, everyone. Back over to you, Sabine.
Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting, and I think you have covered all the questions. But if you out there have any other questions regarding debriefs, you can contact Tony and Sharath on Twitter or via LinkedIn. My guest in 2 weeks will be David Evans, and he's going to talk about how to turn tests into documentation. So please tune in. We have an Easter holiday, and therefore there's no Agile TD Monday session next Monday, so tune in 2 weeks. I thank you for your talk, Tony and Sharath, and I hope to see you, and I know that I will see you in Potsdam. So see you then.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.